man out of Carol Marine and a television reunion that's been decades in the making. Carol.
Yes, it has. For almost 13 years, from 1985 to 1997, I shared an anchor desk at NBC Chicago with Ron Majors. And I marveled at how easily, seamlessly he could handle any situation, especially if it was breaking news. He was his very best in chaos, in the chaos of a big story, working without a net or without a script, but with finesse and judgment and skill. Now, after 51 years in the business, Ron has announced his retirement from ABC 7 News as of May 25th. And so, for the first time in almost 2 decades, we once again share the air on live television.
Well, you know, I've had some TV wives since, but I still love you.
And you know, when you started anchoring with those other women, I felt cheated on. You know, I did. I did. Are you sure it's time?
I am. What I say is I'm reasonably grateful I stayed this long. I'm really grateful that I know it's time. I don't have a second thought about it. And that's something I think you kind of come to gradually. You start to think about it and wear it a little bit. And then I just reached the point where I knew for me it was time to step away. I mean, part of it is I'm wearing 2 hearing aids and I've had a hip replacement. I want to get out while I got some of my body left.
30 years ago, in this studio, you talked to John Calloway, and John said to you, what is it that you think it is about you that makes you so successful? This is what you said then.
I'm not a good judge of what I do. I can't look at myself or any other anchor and say what works or doesn't.
Yeah, it's true.
Is it still true?
I'm a terrible judge of it. I've modified that answer a little bit. I thought about it after I talked to John. And what I say about it now is what made me fit for television is that if you give me and any other journalist a day or 2 days or a week to do a story, I become highly average. If you give me and any other journalist 5 minutes to go out there and sit down on the set and digest what's happening and give it back to you in a way that's understandable, I think I do that pretty well.
And so is it the deadline? Is it the adrenaline?
Yeah, I think part of that. I think a lot of journalists will admit that they can't work until they can feel the deadline. It's not enough to know the deadline. You have to feel the deadline. But live television and breaking moments and the election nights that I loved so much with you, sitting there with Royko beside us, they were wonderful nights, and Dick Kay. I mean, I look back on those nights and say, wow, that was fun.
Do you still love television news?
I love television news. What I'm aware of is I've done it so long now that I don't know that I have the passion for the next fight as I look down the road and see where news might be going. What I really hope about television news is when I first got into the business, 21 years old, there were people retiring, veterans who were retiring, and at that time they were saying they weren't sure the news business was as good as it had been. I think thus it has always been.
The golden age.
Yeah. We all look back on what we thought was better. What I really hope about television news is that somewhere right now there's a 21-year-old coming into this business with the passion that I had then and the eagerness to have the fights and the desire to move the business forward.
So you and I in 1997 shared a fight.
Yeah, we did.
And we both quit when the then management at NBC brought on Jerry Springer as a commentator. And I know that plenty of people still ask you about it. They ask me about it. But sometimes they're surprised when we try to explain it wasn't as simple as Jerry Springer, was it?
No, it was the way decisions got made. It was, just the idea that in those days you would take a guy who was doing a crazy talk show, and their presentation was Jerry Springer would be a social commentator on our newscast to sort of tell people about the lives they live. It was so absurd on the face of us, neither of us thought it would happen. And then when it really did start to happen, we had to face the reality of did we want to do it? And both of us decided, and thankfully I was working with someone as smart and dedicated as you are, who was willing to have that fight, because what people forget about is when we walked away, we were kind of saying, we're not going to let our own management do that, which means, looking down the road, we may not find another management team who wants to hire somebody who would say that publicly. So it really was a scary time for both of us. We didn't know what might happen. We didn't know if there'd be a next job.
No, because neither one of us had a next job.
We walked out.
But one of the things I always say is that Jerry Springer, it wasn't about the First Amendment or that. It was the last and the least of the issues. There'd been all those other fights about crazy slogans or advertisers wanting to have a voice in the copy. So he, in a sense, he was the simplest thing to understand, but it wasn't all that was going on.
No, there had been a lot going on to that point that you and I had difficulties over the years, and thankfully, again, we had a meeting of the minds. We knew what our hopes were for television and journalism and local television news, and you have extremely high ethical standards and values about what it is we do.
As you.
And I was delighted to be able to share those and to have serious moments about the news, have serious conversations. And part of what changed is we used to have those serious conversations, and those are harder now for, I think, all journalists to have.
Why is that?
Well, part of it is big corporations have got an undue amount of control in broadcast news and, to a certain degree, journalism of all kinds, newspapers, all kinds of things. So, and the example I give is, there was a time in the business that you and I both recall that when we were doing a difficult story and we needed a lawyer to look at it, we had a lawyer who was trying to find a way for us to get the story on the air. Today, big corporations provide you with a lawyer whose job is to keep you out of court. So I'm not sure they're as interested in moving the story forward as they are in protecting the corporate interest, and that concerns me a bit.
Was there ever a moment after you left NBC and you weren't employed yet where you had a twinge of regret?
It came much later. What I say about it now is it felt so right at the time that I had no fear about it. I just believed it would work out because we were right. That was very naive. As a senior citizen, I now look back on it and say, that was a frightening risk to take for me and for my family and for my future in the business. It scares me more now than it ever did then.
And yet at the same time, one of the things you told John Calloway was the advice you gave to young journalists, even back then, 30 years ago, was this.
There are only two things true about the broadcasting industry. At least this is my experience. One is that someday you will be fired. The other is it won't be for the right reason. If your psyche is not prepared to deal with that, find something else, because it is a cruel business.
I have not changed that one iota. I'll bet I say that once a month to some young person. That's how tough the business is. And for me to look back on 50-plus years of doing this and be able to say, wow, I not only got to keep working, I got to reach the point where I knew it was time to go away. And very few people in our business get the opportunity to do what I'm doing.
You've never been fired.
Well, no, I was fired from Rocon's radio show once.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay, you were fired once, but it really didn't matter. But when it comes to television news, you've never been fired. You walked away in Minnesota because it was time.
Yeah.
You walked away in Chicago because it was time, and now you're walking away from WLS, and no one's pushing you out the door.
No, in fact, I'm thankful to WLS because everybody thinks Jerry Springer was the first time I walked away. Technically, it was the third. And you're absolutely right. I walked away because of the management at NBC. I walked away because I had a disagreement with ownership in Minneapolis. But more interesting to me is, in San Francisco in 1974, about a quarter of the newsroom left over a period of 1 year, primarily because for the first time we learned that our newsroom, that our ownership, that our outside consultants to take advice on what we should do in news. And it was the first time that had ever happened.
And you don't like consultants,
and many of
do
us,
you?
many of us left, and it was in vain. Trust me, it was in vain. The firm ground of principle gave way beneath our very feet.
Because as I recall, when you left Minnesota, there was that consultant.
Yes, there was a consultant I happened to disagree with.
And you and I share that disagreement, I know. So there are things I know that you won't do or say on television, even if they're written right on the script for you to read it by the producer.
Less than you, though.
Okay.
You have to concede.
All right, I stipulate that. But let's go through your pet peeves.
Well,
What won't you read?
There are some things that will come up that I won't read, or I'll try and change to make them, just to simply make them more me. I mean, we all have some little pet peeves along the way. My current pet peeve is breaking news. And it seems to me that breaking news has become, a guy named Tom Robbins wrote a book some time ago, and in it, he had a wonderful quote about how good ideas get perverted, how they get seized by fanatics, and they cling to them to their last fingernail breaks, and they get twisted and turned. I think the wonderful line of his is it's how the loving teachings of Jesus became the starving cliches of Christianity. And I feel that way about breaking news. Breaking news is a great idea. If there's breaking news, you should do it. And people are interested in breaking news. But if you label everything breaking news, you've now become that fanatic who clings to the idea until the idea is no good anymore. So I struggle with breaking news and some of those kinds of things. Television news, because it's trying to ring a bell with the audience, wants to brand things.
Okay, so how about this? A mother's worst nightmare.
Won't come out of my lips. No, mothers have a lot of nightmares.
Yes.
Yeah, and any child who's in a serious situation suddenly becomes little. They become little Johnny or little Mary. It may be an average-sized kid. So, yeah, those kind of things. You know, there's the newsroom, I think, sometimes laughs at me over murder. Murder is a criminal charge. Homicide is the act of one person killing another. Murder doesn't exist until there is a criminal charge. So when you say, you can say police are investigating what they call a murder, but you can't say someone was murdered today because, well, no one's been charged and we don't know if that was a murder. Maybe it was self-defense, maybe it was manslaughter, maybe it was something else. So those kind of things, I think in today's world, a lot of journalists think, well, that's kind of esoteric, but I think the words we say all count for something.
And do we need journalists to say those?
Yeah, I think we do. And
that people have a very low opinion of our profession.
Yeah, that's okay. That's all right. I'm happy being a journalist. And let me tell you that all the years I've been in this business, I only know of one instance in which a journalist I knew tried to turn a story in some way to make it something they were more comfortable with or an agenda they have. And aside from that, every journalist I've ever known and every journalist I've ever worked with really was trying to present a story that had some facts in it that you could make up your mind about, that if you wanted to find out more about, you could go on and find more out about it. I'm delighted to have had the opportunity to work with those people who were overall fair-minded and concerned and wanted to do a job that meant something.
Best story you ever covered, if there is one?
Wow, best story I ever covered. I know the scariest story I ever covered. I was a young reporter in Portland, Oregon, and there was a riot at the Oregon State Prison. Saturday, I got a call from the station, photographer's going to pick you up. They picked me up. We went to the Oregon State Prison. When we got there, a man came running out and said, TV crew, yes, you're coming with me. Where are we going? And I can see fires inside the prison. The cell blocks are burning. And he said, they've taken some guards. We're afraid they're going to hurt the guards. They want us to hear a list of demands. We need you to listen to the list of demands. We go cell block the prison holds. On the way in, we pass a cell block they don't hold, and prisoners are yelling out what they're going to do to us if they can get their hands on us. We go to the cell block the prison holds. We go inside. There's a prisoner who begins a list of demands. It's drizzling outside. Another prisoner walks in, and he's wet. He's been outside and now in, and that's not supposed to happen. The head of the corrections department at the time turns to him and said, "Where do you come from?" He said, "I just came from outside. You don't hold this cell block anymore. You're going to listen to our demands. If you don't meet our demands, we're going to take the head off a guard." And I think at the moment they were holding 40 guards. "We're going to take a head off a guard, and we're going to do it every half hour until you meet our demands." Head of the correction system put his nose in the guy's face and said, "You do, and I'm holding you responsible." The words that are seared in my brain forever are, "I'm doing life in 10 in a state with no capital punishment. You want to rip up my effing driver's license?" Things had taken a bad turn for us at that moment. The young man said, "Listen to our demands." We listened to the demands. And then they said, "All right, get out of here. Go tell the world about our demands, or bad things are going to happen." And we got to leave. But I spent 15, 20 minutes in there not knowing if we were going to get to leave. The standoff went on for 24 hours. No guards lost their lives. Millions of dollars in damage done to the prison. And we were shooting film in those days. I sent the film back to Portland, and they did the 11 o'clock news with the piece I had in it, and then they were going to turn all the raw film around and make a half-hour special out of it. And in the half-hour special, it contained what the kid had said about ripping up
The
my
driver's license.
effing driver's license. A columnist called the PR guy at the station and said, "Did you hear that?" "Did I hear what?" The Major's just the story, and it had the F word in it. PR guy on confident ground said, "Ron Majors is a good reporter, and if it was in there, he meant it to be."
Well, he knew you pretty well, didn't
Yeah, he might have. So the headline, fortunately buried inside the paper, the headline on the column was, "KGW F blank 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 and meant it."
How old were you?
I was 22 years old.
And did you know then that this was the job you wanted to do for life?
I think the first time I ever walked in a newsroom, I knew that. I really liked the people in there. I really liked what they were doing. I really liked the idea that it would be something different every day, and I knew I could never be an 8 to 5 guy. I'd already been a troubled college student. I went to 5 of them, and I like to say I think I left 2 voluntarily. I was a troubled youth. I kind of didn't know where I fit, and
You
suddenly...
weren't president of the student council. You weren't an A student. You weren't...
No. Captain of the basketball team. I like that.
Were you a happy kid in Yakima?
Yeah, I was a happy kid. I was a very happy kid. I didn't do well with authority, and I didn't do well with... who knows what I would be diagnosed as now. I was impatient. I know I had a pretty high IQ, and I learned things pretty easily and quickly. And once I got it, I didn't want to know anything else. Just, okay, I got that. Let's move on now.
Do you have a photographic memory? Because the people in Minnesota at that station you worked at seem to believe that you did.
I do have I know I have a very good recall. And one of the things I did, for example, before I was hired at NBC, and I came down here to NBC after having quit in Minnesota, and they said, let's do an audition. What would you like to do? And they said, you could write a few stories. And I said, sure, I could do that. I'll write a few stories. And they wrote a few stories. And I said, well, the other thing I'd like to do is just give me some newspaper articles, and let me look at them, and let me tell you what was in them. And I don't think that's a photographic memory. I think that's just finding a way to collate facts and give them back in a way. So I don't think of it as a photographic memory, but it's an advantage.
For a lot of people, and I talked to friends today about this, people think they know you because they've seen you all this time, and you're in their living room, and they feel friendly towards you, but they don't really know you. And one of the things that you've told the world about a little bit, but I think not universally, is that for all these years you have been in alcohol recovery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been living a life of recovery since 1979. But what I say about it is I only quit drinking because it was going to kill me. And if it makes you feel any better about it, for those people who, some people, you say, oh, I don't drink. You don't drink anything? No, I don't drink anything. Why? No, thanks. Really? No, I'm a recovering alcoholic. And you can see them be kind of uncomfortable in that moment. And I usually try to say something like, think of it this way. Everybody gets a ration of whiskey. I just drank mine faster than most. And I didn't miss a drop that I had coming to me. My wife had an intervention for me. It involved one of my children. My kids went to family counseling when I went to formal treatment for alcohol and drug addiction. And thankfully, since July of 1979, I have maintained a life of recovery.
How has it informed or transformed you today? I mean, what has it given you?
I think more than anything else, it's helped me to understand that I would not want to always be judged for the way I once was. And I hope I would afford that same opportunity to others. We all, as adults, have the opportunity to change, to take new roads. And I will tell you that when I was drinking and using drugs, I was someone you wouldn't have liked. I was someone I didn't like much. And that life of recovery it gave me the chance to become the person I once thought I could be.
Is it still a struggle?
No, it's not a struggle. It becomes something that's so integral in your life that I think and that's sort of one of the promises of recovery, that it becomes so much a part of your life that it's just something that you live. The saying is, that helps me to remember, I know I've probably got a good binge left in me. I don't know if I got a good recovery left in me. So I'll keep this one.
So you go into this retirement. Would you ever make a comeback? Bill did, Walter did. There'll be people calling you up saying, come on, work for my radio station, do something.
Can't imagine it. It's a well thought out moment for me. I really believe I've done it enough. Would I ever appear on a show like this or be a guest on a radio show? Sure, probably. But would I ever do anything regularly again? I can't imagine that. I on the side, I breed and race thoroughbreds. The breeding business has become a pretty big business.
You love horses.
I do love it. I absolutely love it.
And you almost had a horse in the Derby.
Well, a horse we sold was almost in the Derby. The business is to sell yearlings. We occasionally keep one to race. My partner, Rob Marcocchio, and I, he's been in every deal I've done for 25 years. We now have probably 38 horses at the moment. We'll have 6 to 8 for sale in September when they're yearlings. The crop that's born right now this spring, will be sold September of next year as yearlings. And then someone else buys them and takes them and races them. The breeding side can be run a bit more like a business than the racing side. In the racing side, you do a ton of due diligence to put yourself in a place where you hope to get lucky. But if you don't get lucky, it's a problem.
Well, you've been lucky enough, right?
I've been very lucky. I run it as a business. We've been very fortunate to be successful in this business, and it's something I truly do love.
Your wife, Elise, is in the studio, and one of the things she told me the other day was, and she is a therapist, she said that she advises her clients to not retire together because she thinks it's bad for the marriage. I imagine she's given you the same advice?
Well, she's not retiring. Yeah, she'll keep her job, and we'll work out a schedule that's okay for us. And yes, she's a therapist, and what I'm proud to say about the women in my life, my wife and my 3 daughters, amongst those 4, let me see if I can get this right. I'm a college dropout. Amongst those 4 women, there are 4 bachelor's degrees, 2 masters of social work degrees, a master's of divinity, a master's of pastoral counseling, and I say, and people think I'm kidding, I'm serious when I say I do what I do so the women in my life can make a difference.
Well, you made a difference too, hon, and you still will. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For doing this on-air appearance.
Nice to see you.
You too, hon. Phil Ponte is back with a preview of Jeffrey Bear's latest 10 That Changed America program in a conversation recorded earlier.
Is that breaking news?
Breaking news.
On gender